Today's tale in the Ancient Irish Tales, and we're working through the Ulster cycle, and today is a tale of the Wooing of Emer. The Wooing of Emer. According to the most ancient tradition, Chulainn, it seems, was, unmarried. But stories of tolcamacha, or wooings, were popular in the early Irish literature. And we're not surprised to find that ere long the greatest of all Ulster heroes, though still a boy, was supplied with a wife. The Wooing of Emer exists in several versions, the oldest of which was composed as early as the 8th century. The wandering of an incoherent character of a narrative is probably due in large to the fact that the author has added to the simple tale of Chulainn's wooing numerous themes derived from older sagas, notably the account of how Chulainn went to learn feats of arms from the Amazonian Scarach. Chulainn's dialogue with Emer is couched in a variety of highly poetical language, which was comprehensible only to the initiated, hence the means little when, rendered into modern English. Part 1. We are going to do the full thing in this video. It is broken down into parts with titles, so I will be saying the title and that. So this is part 1, Chulainn's wooing. There lived once upon a time a great and famous king in Macha, whose name was Concobar, son of Fratres Finchil, and this reigned there which was pretty store of good things, enjoyed by the men of Ulster. Peace there was, and quite a pleasant greeting. There was of fruits and fatness, and harvest of the sea, and there was power and law and good lordship during his time among the men of Erin. In the king's house at Macha, there was a great state rank of plenty. Of this form was that house, the Red Branch of Concobar, namely after the likeness of Techmacha of Tara. 9 compartments were in it from the fire to the wall. 32 feet was the height of each bronze partition in the house, carvings of red yew therein. The wooden floor beneath, and while the roofing tiles above, the compartment of Concobar was in the front of the house, with a ceiling of silver with pillars of bronze, their headpieces, glittered with the gold, and were set in carbuncles, so that the day and night were equally light therein. There was a gong of silver above the king, hung from the roof tree of the royal house. Whenever Concobar struck the gong in, his royal rod, all the men of Ulster were silent. The 12 cubicles of the 12 chariot chiefs were round about the king's compartment. All the valiant warriors of the men of Ulster found space in the king's house at the time of the drinking, and yet no men of them would crowd the other. Splendid and lavish and beautiful were the vibrant warriors of the men of Ulster in that house, and it were great and numerous gatherings of every kind and wonderful pastimes, games and music and singing. Their heroes performed their feats, poetry singing, harpers and players on the timpan striking up their sounds. Now, once the men of Ulster were in Macha with Concobar, drinking from the beer vat known as the Iron Chisholm. 100 fillings of beverage went into it every evening. Such was the drinking of the Iron Chisholm, which at one sitting would satisfy all the men of Ulster. The chariot chiefs of Ulster were performing on ropes stretched across from door to door in the house of Macha. 15 feet, and 90 was the size of the house. Again, as you can see in like all of the stories and lore in Irish Celtic, 3 is a huge number. Any numbers I have found in my studies have always been in multiples of 3. So keep that in mind as you're listening to these numbers, that it does play a very significant role, the number 3 and multiples of 3, in Irish culture as well as the Irish lore. The chariot chiefs were performing 3 feats: a spear feat, an apple feat, and a sword edge feat. Colin the victorious son of Agramon, Fergus son of Rogue the overbold, Lugr the triumphant son of Conad, Kirshur son of Uchar, Dobrich son of Leathers, Cuchulainn son of Sukun, Silk son of Bernice, from whom the pass the Burning is named, and the Wanderer of Emer. From him sang a story of Skells, for he was a mighty storyteller. Cuchulainn suppressed all of them, all that those feats for quickness and deftness. The woman of Ulster loved Cuchulainn greatly for his dexterity in his feats, for his nimbleness on his harp, on his leap, and for his excellence of wisdom, and well for the sweetness of his speech, and, of course, for the beauty of his face, for the loveliness of his look, for the kingly eyes were 7 pupils. 4 of them, well, in his one eye, and 3 of them in the other. He had 7 fingers on either hand, and 7 toes on either of his 2 feet. Many were his gifts. Well, first his gift of produce, until the warrior's fame appeared. The gifts of feats, the gift of Burfish, a game like draughts, and, a gift of chess playing, and a gift of calculating, the gift of soothsaying, the gift of disenchantment, the gift of beauty. But Cuchulainn had 3 deficits. 1, that he was too young, for his beard had not grown in, and all the more would unknowingly deride him. That he was too daring, and, that he was too beautiful. The men of Ulster took counsel about Cuchulainn, for their women and maidens loved him greatly, for Cuchulainn had no wife at the time. This was their counsel, that they should seek out a maiden whom Cuchulainn might choose to woo. For they were sure that a man who had a wife to attend him would be, less likely to spoil their daughters and accept the love of their women. And besides, they were troubled and afraid that Cuchulainn would perish early, so that for that reason they wished to give him a wife, that he might leave an heir, knowing that his rebirth would be of himself. Then Conchobar set out 9 men into each province of Erin to seek a wife for Cuchulainn, to see, if any stronghold or in any chief place of Erin they could find a daughter of the king, or, of a chief, or a hospitaller whom it might please Cuchulainn to woo. All the messengers returned that day a year later, and they had not found a maiden whom Cuchulainn chose to woo. Thereupon Cuchulainn himself went to woo a maiden he knew in Loga, the gardens of Lu, namely Emer, the daughter of Fogro the Wily. Cuchulainn himself and his charioteer Log, son of Rangbar, went in his chariot. That was the one chariot, and the best of the horses and the chariots of Ulster could not follow on account, of the swiftiness and speed of the chariot, and, of the chariot chief, who sat in it. Then Cuchulainn found the maiden on her playing field, with her foster sisters around her daughters of the landowners that lived along the stronghold of Forgal. They were learning needlework and fine handiwork from Emer, all of the maidens of Erin, she was the one maiden who he designed to address and to woo. For she had the 6 gifts: the gift of beauty, the gift of voice, the gift of sweet speech, the gift of needlework, the gifts of wisdom, and chastity. Chulainn had said that no maiden should go with him but she who was his equal in age, and from a race and skill and deftness, he was the best handiworker of all the maidens of Erin. For that none but such she was fitting wife for him. Now, as Emer was the one maiden to fulfill all these conditions, Chulainn went to woo her above all. It was a festive array that Chulainn went forth and that day to address Emer, and to show his beauty to her. As the maidens were sitting on the bench gathering at the stronghold, they heard coming towards them the clatter of horse hooves, with the clattering of the chariot, and the crackling of straps, and the grating of wheels, and the rush of a hero, and the clanking of weapons. "Let one of you see," said Emer, "what it is that is coming towards us." "Truly, I see," said Fel, the daughter of Fogel, "2 steeds alike in size, beauty, fierceness, and speed, bounding side by side. Spirited they are, and powerful, pricking their ears, their manes long and curly, with curling tails. At the right side of the pole of the chariot is a grey horse, broad in his haunches, fierce, swift, wild. Thundering he comes along, talking small bounds, and with head erect and chest expanded. Beneath his 4 hard hooves and form and solid turfs steams a flame. A flock of swift birds follows, but he takes his course along the road. A flash of breath darts above from him, and a blast of rowdy flaming sparks is poured from his curved jaws. The other horse is jet black, and his head firmly knit in his feet. Broad-hooved and slender, long and curly are his mane and tail. Down his broad forehead hang heavy curls of hair. Spirited and fiery, he fiercely gallops along, stamping firmly on the ground. Beautifully he sweeps along, as having outstripped the horses of the land. He bounds over the smooth, dry sward, following the levels of the Midglen, where no obstacle obstructs his pace. I see a chariot of fine wood with wicker, moving on the wheels of white bronze, a pole of white silver, with a mounting of white bronze, its frame very high of creaking copper, round and firm. A strong curved yoke of gold, 2 firm-pleated yellow reins, the shafts hard and straight as sword blades. Within the chariot a dark, sad man, comest of the men of Erin. Around him a beautiful crimson 5-fold tunic, fastened at its opening on his white breast with a brooch of inlaid gold, against which sheaves the beating in full strokes a shirt of with white hold interwoven red with a flaming gold. 7 red dragon gems on the ground of either of his eyes. 2 white, blood-red cheeks that breathe forth the sparks of flashes of fire. A ray of love burns in his look. Methink the shower of pearls has fallen into his mouth. As black as the side of a charred beam each of his eyebrows. On his 2 thighs rests a golden hilted sword, and fastened to the copper frame of the chariot is a blood-red spear, with a sharp mettlesome blade on a shaft of wood fitted to the hand. Over his shoulders a crimson shield with a rim of silver, crest with figurines of golden animals. He leaps the hero's salmon leap into the air, and does many like swift feats. This is the description of the chariot chief of the single chariot. Before him in the chariot there's a charioteer, a very slender, tall, much freckled man. On his head a very curly, bright red hair, held by a fillet bronze upon his brow, which prevents the hair from falling over his face. On both sides of his head, paintings of gold confine his hair. A shoulder mantle about him with sleeves opened at the two elbows, and in his hand a goad of red gold, with which he guides the horses. Meanwhile, Cuchulainn had come to a place where the maidens were, and recognized Cuchulainn, and she said, "May gods make smooth the path before you." "And you," he said, "may you be safe from every harm." "Whence comest thou?" she asked. "From inside Emer," he replied. "Where did you sleep?" She said, "We slept in the house of a man who tends the cattle of the plain of Tithra." "What was your food there?" she asked. "The run of a chariot was cooked for us there," he replied. "Which way dost thou come?" "Between the two mountains of the wood," said he. "Which way dost thou take after that?" "'Tis not hard to tell," he said, "from Clover of the Sea to the great secret of the Tuatha De Danann, and the form of the steeds of Emin Macha, over the Vorgu's garden, and the great sow's back, and over Glen of Great Dam, between the gods and his prophet, over the Marrow of the women Feldham, between the boar and his dam, over the Washington place of the horses of Dee, between the king of An and his servant Mochon, the four corners of the world, over great crime and remnants, and the great feast between the vat and the little vat, to the gardens of Lu, and the daughters of Tethra nephew Forug, king of the Fomorians. And what, O maiden, is the account of thee?" said Cuchulainn. "Truly, it's not hard to tell," said the maiden. "Tara of the woman, whilst of the maidens of the Pergon of chastity, and probation that is not taken a watcher that yet sees no one. A modest woman is a dragon which no one comes near. The daughter of a king is a flame of hospitality, a road that cannot be entered. I have champions that follow me to guard me from wherever who would carry me off against my will, without their and Forgo's knowledge of my act." "Who are the champions that follow thee, O maiden?" said Cuchulainn. "Truly, it's not hard to tell," said Emer. "I call Louis, Luth, Luther, Lath, Gobrus, son of Titha, Tereth and Trethach, Boran, and Bor, Bas, son of Okrub, 8 called Kona, and Kona, son of Forgo. Every man of them has the strength of 100, and the feats of 9. Hard it were to tell the many powers of Forgo himself. He is stronger than any labourer, more learned than any druid, more accurate than any poet. It will be more than all your games fight against Forgo himself, for many powers of his have been recounted of many deeds." "Why dost thou not reckon me, O maiden, for those strong men?" said Cuchulainn. "If thy deeds have been recounted, why should I not reckon thee among them?" "Truly I swear, O maiden," said Cuchulainn, "that I shall make my deeds to be recounted among the glories and the strength of the heroes." "What then is thy strength?" said Emer. "That's quickly told. When my strength in fight is weakest, I fight off 20. The third part of my strength is suffering for 30. Alone I may combat against 40. Under my protection 100 are secure. From dread of me, warriors avoid folds and battlefield. Hosts of magnitude and many armed men flee before the terror of my face." "Those are goodly fights for a tender boy," said the maiden, "but thou hast not yet reached the strength of chariot chiefs." "Truly, O maiden," he said. "Well, I had been brought up by my dear foster father, Concobar, not as a Curl strives to bring up his children between the flag of kneading tough, between the fire and the wall, nor the floor of a single lader, will have been brought up by Concobar. And among the chariot chiefs and champions, among the jesters, the druid, among the poets and the learned men, among the nobles and the landlords of Ulster, have I been reared, so that I have all their manners and gifts. Who then were they brought me to these deeds for which thou hast boast? Said Emer. That truly is easily told. Fair speech Skensta has taught me, so that I am strong, wise, swift, and deft. I am perfect judgmently, and give heed to arguments. I direct the arguments of all the men of Ulster, and though trained of Skensta, my decisions are unalterable. Bali, lord of the lands, on account of his, racial kinship, took me to himself so that I got my due with him. I invite the men of Concobert's province with their king. I entertain them for the space of a week. I settle their gifts and their spoils. I aid them in their honour and their findings. Fergus has so fostered me that I'm mighty warriors through strength of valour, am a fierce and mighty and in powers, so that I'm able to guard the borders of the land against foreign foes. I am a shelter of every poor man. I am rampant of fight for every wealthy man. I will give comfort to him who wretched. I deal out mischief to him who is strong. All of this, though, the fostersonage of Fergus. Argan the poet to his knee I came. Therefore, I'm able to praise a king for a possession of excellency. Therefore, I can stand up to any man in valour, in prowess, in wisdom, in splendour, in cleverness, in justice, and in boldness. I am a match for any chariot chief. I yield thanks to none save Concobar, the battle victorious. Fulcrum has reared me so that Conal the victorious is my foster brother. For the sake of Dalsha, culprit of the gentle face, has taught me, so that I am an apt in the arts of the gods of Druidism, and well learned in the excellence of knowledge. All men of Ulster have taken part in my bringing up, alike charioters and chariot chiefs, kings and chiefs poets, so that I am daring to host and multitudes, so that I fight for the honour of them all. Honourably was I called into being by Lugh, son of Cormac MacEthan, when Dithra went to the house of the mighty one of Burg. And thou, O maiden, said Cuchulainn, how hast thou been reared in the gardens of Lugh? Well, that's not hard to relate to thee, truly, answered the maiden. I was brought up, said she, in ancient virtues and lawful behaviour, in keeping of chastity and rank equal to a queen, in stillness of form, so that me attribute every noble grace and demeanour among the hosts of Erin's women. Good indeed are those features, said Cuchulainn. Why then should it be fitting for us both to become one? For I have not hitherto found a maiden capable of holding conference with me in a meeting in this wise. One more question, said the maiden. Hast thou a wife? No, said Cuchulainn. Said the maiden, I may not marry before my sister is married, for she is older than I, namely Fel, daughter of Fergum, whom thou seest with me here. She is excellent in handiwork. It is not she truly whom I have fallen in love, said Cuchulainn, nor have I accepted a woman who has known a man before me. And I have been told that yon girl was once Combra's Nifir. While they were thus conversing, Cuchulainn saw the breasts of the maiden over the bosom of her smock, and he said, Fair is the plain of the noble yoke. Then the maiden spoke these words, No one comes to this plain that does not slay as many as 100 on every fjord in the ford of Sackmanor at a Burtu Balkr Agus, where swift Bray breaks and bow and Freedom. Fair is this plain, the plain of the noble yoke, said Cuchulainn. No one comes to this plain who has not achieved a feat of leaping over 3 walls and slaying 3 times 9 men in one blow. One of each of my brothers being in each group of 9, yet preserves the brother in the midst of each 9 of them alive, and accompanied by them and my foster sister, bring out of Folgar's stronghold my weight in gold. fares the plain of the noble yoke? Said Cuchulainn. None come to this plain, she said, that does not go without sleep from summer's end to the beginning of spring, from the beginning of spring to May Day, and then from May Day to beginning of winter. Even as thou hast command, so shall all be by me be done, said Cuchulainn. And by me thy offer is accepted. It is taken and guaranteed, said Emer. Yet one question more. What is thy count of thyself? She said. Well, I am a nephew of the man who disappears another in the wood of Bab. A punning use of the name Concobar. There is a Rossbrook named Concobar that unites the Doffoth. And thy name, she said. I am the hero of the plague that befalls dogs, said he. A punning reference to his own name, the Hound of Chulainn. See, after these noble words, Cuchulainn went from hence, and without anything further converse on that day, while Cuchulainn was driving across Barg Loch, his charioteer asked him, Now, the words that thou and the maiden Emer spoke, what did you mean by them? Dost thou not know, answered Cuchulainn, that I am wooing Emer, and that is for this reason we disguised our words, lest the girl should understand that I am wooing her. For if Fergal knew, we should not meet with his consent. Cuchulainn then reported a conversation from beginning to his end with his charioteer, explaining to him that because of the lengths of the way, they slept that night in Emen Macha. Then the daughters of the landowners told their parents of the youth who had come in a splendid chariot, and of the conversation held between him and Emer, and that they did not know what they had said to one another, and they had turned from them across the plain of Berg northward. The landowners, of course, relayed all this to Forgal the Wily, and told him that the girl had spoken to Cuchulainn. It is true, said Forgal the Wily. A madman from Emen Macha. There's been no converse. He's here to converse with Irma. The girl has fallen in love with him, and that's why they talk to one another, but shall avail them nothing. I shall hinder them, he said. Thereupon Forgal the Wily went to Emen Macha, disguised in the garb of a foreigner, as if it were to the embassy of a king of the Gauls, that he had come to confer with Concobar, with an offering to him of golden treasure, and wine and gall, and all sorts of good things. In numbers were they 3. Great welcome was made by him, and then on the 3rd day he sent away his men. Cuchulainn and Chulainn and the other charioteers of Ulster were praised before him. He said that it was true that the charioteers performed marvellously, but that there were Cuchulainn to go to the Donal Sothra of Abla, Scotland, and skill would be more wonderful still, and that if he went to Scotia to learn solely of feats, he would excel the warriors in all of Europe. But the reason for which he was proposing this to Cuchulainn was that he might never return again. For he thought that if Cuchulainn became Scotia's friend, he would come to his death thereby, although the wildness and fierceness of that warrior. Chulainn consented to go, and Forgal bound himself to give Chulainn whatever he desired, if he should go within a certain time. Forgal went home, and the warriors arose in the morning and set themselves to do as they vowed. So they started. Chulainn and Logoth the triumphant Concobar, and Cora the victorious, some say, went with them. But Chulainn first went across Melbrug to visit the maiden. He talked to Emer before going in the ship, and the maiden told him that it had been Forgal who in Emen Macha had desired him to go to learn the soldiery feats in order that they might two not meet. And she bade him be on his guard whenever he went, lest Forgal should destroy him. Either of them promised that they would keep their chastity until they should meet again, unless either of them died meanwhile. They bade each other farewell, and he turned towards Alba. Part 2. Cuchulainn's education in arms. Ooh, this is going to be good. When they reached Donald and Alba, they were taught by him to blow a leathern bellows under the flagstone of a small hole. On it they would perform theirs till the souls were black or livid. They were taught another thing on a spear, on which they would jump and perform at its point. This was called the champion's cooling round. The points of spears, or dropping on his head. Then the daughter of Donald Domra, First Fist by name, fell in love with Chulainn. Her form was, well, very gruesome. Her knees were large, her heels turned before her feet behind her, big dark grey eyes in her head, her face as back as the bowl of a jet. A very large forehead she had, her rough, bright red hair in threads wound round her head. Chulainn refused her. Then she swore to be revenged on him for this. Donald said that Chulainn would not have a perfect knowledge of their learning until he went to Scrasha, who lived in the east of Alba. So the four went across Alba. Chulainn, Concobar, King of Ulster, Cornwall the virtuous, and Lothar the triumphant. Then before their eyes appeared unto them a vision. Eamon Macha passed with Concobar and Conor and Logar, were not able to go. The daughter of Donald had raised that vision in order to sever Chulainn from his companions to his ruin. Other versions say that it was Fogel the Wily who raised the vision before them to induce them to turn back, so that by returning, Chulainn should fail to fulfill what he had promised him in Eamon Macha. Thereby he would be shamed, or that he would pre-venture in spirit and go eastward to learn solidarity feats, both known and, well, unknown, of Scrasha. It would still be more likely to be killed being alone. Then, of his own free will, Chulainn departed from them along an unknown road. For the powers in the girl Domra were great, and she wrought evil against him, and severed him from his companions. Now, when Chulainn went across Alba, he was sad and gloomy and weary. For the loss of his comrades, neither knew whether he should go to seek Scratch. But he had promised his comrades that he would not return again to Eamon Macha unless he either reached Scratch or, well, met his death. Now, seeing that he was lost, he lingered, and while he was there, he beheld a terrible giant beast, like a lion, coming towards him, which kept watching him, but did not do him any harm. Whichever way he went, the beast went before him, turning its side toward him. Then he took a leap and was on its back. He did not guide it,
I don't know that one,
but went wherever the beast liked. In that ways they journeyed 4 days, until they came to the uttermost bounds of men, and to an island where lads were roving on a small loch, and the lads laughed at the unwonted sight of the herseful beast doing service to a man. Chulainn then leapt off the beast and parted from him, and he bade it farewell. He passed on, and then came to a large house in a deep glen, wherein was a maiden fair of form. The maiden addressed him, and bade him welcome. "Welcome art thou, Chulainn," she said. He asked her how she knew her name. She answered that they both had been dear foster children of Wolf King and Saxon. "When I was there, and thou learning sweet speech from him," she said, "he then gave meat and drink, and he turned away from her. Then he met a brave youth who gave him the same welcome. They conversed together, and then Chulainn inquired of him the way to the stronghold of Scratch. The youth taught him the way across the plain of ill luck that lay before him. On hither half of the plain the feet of men would stick fast. On the further half the grass would rise and hold them fast in their points of its blades. The youth gave him a wheel and told him to follow its track across one half of the plain. He gave him also an apple and told him to follow the way which the apple ran, and that in such wise he would reach the end of the plain. Thus Chulainn went across the plain afterwards, proceeding farther on. The youth had told him that there was a large glen before him, and a single narrow path through it, which was full of monsters, that they had been sent by Fergal to destroy him, and that his road rows of Skresh lay across the terrible mountain fastness. Then each of them wished a blessing on the other. Chulainn and the youth Eclabrosh. It was he who taught him how he should win honor in the house of Skresh. The same youth also foretold of him that he would suffer hardships and straits in the cattle raid of Cooley, and what evil and exploits the contrasts he would achieve against the men of Erin. Then Chulainn, following the young man's instructions, went on the road across the plain of ill luck and through the peerless glen. It was the road that Chulainn took to the camp where the scholars of Scratch were. He asked where she was. "In yonder island," said they. "Which way must I take to reach her?" Chulainn asked. "By the bridge of the cliff, which no man can cross until he has achieved valor." For thus was that bridge, and it had two low ends, and in the mid-space high, whether anybody leapt on one end of it, the other would lift itself up and throw him on his back. Some variations relate that a crowd of warriors of Erin were in that stronghold, learning feats from the Scarsh, namely Ferris Samantoma, Nisi son of Ucha, and Lochmore son of Egramus, and Feman son of Frora, and a redoubtable host besides. But in this version it is not told that they were there at that time. Chulainn tried 3 times to cross the bridge and could not do it. The men jeered him. Then, in a frenzy, he jumped on the head of the bridge and made the hero's salmon leap, so that he landed in the middle of it, and then on the other head of the bridge had not fully raised itself up when he reached it. He threw himself from it and was on the ground of the island. He went up on the stronghold and struck the door with the shaft of his spear, so that it went through it. Scratch was truly, she said, this must be someone who has achieved valor elsewhere. And she sent her daughter Ushas to know who the youth might be. Then Ushas came and conversed with Chulainn. On the 3rd day she advised him that, if he were to achieve valor that he had come, that he should go through the hero's salmon leap to reach Scath, in a place where they're treachering her 2 sons, Cor and Celt, the great yew tree, and that he should set his sword between her breast until she yielded him 3 wishes, namely, to teach him without neglect, that without the payment of a wedding gift, that he might wed Usha, and that she should foretell his future, for she was a prophetess. Chulainn then went to the place where Scratch was. He placed his 2 feet on the edges of the basket, and his feet at the bard in his sword, and he put the point to her heart, saying, "Death hangs over thee." "Name 3 demands," she said. "Thy 3 demands, outcast, utter them in one breath." "They must be fulfilled," said Chulainn. And he pledged her. Ushut then was given to Chulainn, and Scratch taught him the skills of arms. During the time that he was with Scratch, and was the husband of Usha, her daughter, a certain famous man, who lived in Munster, by the name Lugan, son of Nos, son of Almec, the renowned king and foster brother of Chulainn, went eastward with 12 chariot chiefs of the high kings of Munster to woo 12 daughters of Corneth, Carbra Nifr, and they had all been betrothed before. When Emer's father, Father the Wily, heard this, he went to Tara and told Lugut that the best maidens in Erin, both as form and chastity and handiwork, was in his house unmarried. Lusud it pleased him. Then Fogger betrothed the maiden Lugut and said that the 12 other kings that were gathered together with Othra, he betrothed 12 daughters of 12 landed prosperers in Berg. The king accompanied Fogger in his stronghold for the wedding. Now, when Emer was brought to Longard, to sit by his side, she took between both hands his 2 cheeks and laid on the truth of his honor and his life, confessing that it was Chulainn she loved, that Fogger was against it, and that anyone who should take her as his wife would suffer a loss of honor. Then, for fear of Chulainn, Lug did not dare take Emer, and so he returned home again. Scass was at that time carrying on a war against the other tribes over whom Princess Afe ruled. The 2 hosts assembled to fight, but Chulainn had been put in bonds by Scath and a sleeping potion given him beforehand to prevent him from going into battle, lest anything should befall him there. She did this as a precaution. But after an hour, Chulainn suddenly startled up out of his sleep. The sleeping potion that would have held anybody else for 24 hours in sleep held him only for an hour. He went forth with 2 sons of Scash against the 3 sons of Ishan, namely Cur, Keet, and Cruf, 3 warriors of Afis. Alone he countered them all 3, and they fell by him. On the next morning again the battle was set, and the 2 hosts marched forward until the 2 lines met face to face. Then the 3 sons of Ishan advanced, namely Cheobri and Brau, 3 other of Afin's warriors, and began combat against the 2 sons of Tresh. They won the past feats. Thereupon Scratch uttered a sigh, for she knew not that would come of it. First, because there was no third with her 2 sons against the 3, and next, because she was afraid of Effie, who was the hardest woman warrior in the world. Chulainn, however, went up to her 2 sons and sprang upon the path to meet all 3, and they fell by him. Afi then challenged Cass to combat, and Chulainn went forth to meet Afi. Before going, he asked what it was Afi loved most. Scatch said, what most she loves are her 2 horses, her chariot and charioteer. Chulainn and Afi went on the path of feats and began to combat there. Afi shattered Chulainn's weapon, and his sword was broken off at the hilt. Then Chulainn cried, Ah me, the charioteer of Afi! Here 2 horses and her chariot have fallen down the glen, and all have perished. At that Afi looked up. Then Chulainn sprang towards her and seized her under her 2 breasts, took her on his back, on a shoulder load, and bore her away to his own host. Then he threw her from him to the ground, and over her held his naked sword. Life for life, O Chulainn, said Afi. My 3 demands to me, he said. Thou shalt have them, and thou breasts them. These are my 3 demands, he said. Thou hast hostage and scarce, nor ever oppose her, and thou remain with me this night before thy stronghold, and that thou bear me a son. I promise all this to thee, she said. And thus it was done. Chulainn went with Afti and remained with her that night. Then Afi said she was with child, and that she should bear a boy. On this day 7 years I will send him to Erin, she said. And leave thou a name for him? Cuchulainn left a golden finger ring for him, and told her that the boy was to go and seek him in Erin so soon as the ring should fit on his finger. And then he said that Conal was a name to be given him, and charged her that she should not make himself known to any one man also, that he should not turn out of the way of any man, nor refuse combat to any. Thereupon Cuchulainn returned again to his own people. And he went along the same road, and he met an old woman on the road, blind in her left eye. She asked him to beware and avoid the road before her. He said there was no other footing for him, save the cliff on the sea that was beneath him. She besought him only to leave the road to her. Then he left the road, only clinging to it with his toes. And as he paused over him, she held his giant toe to throw him down the cliff. He had foreseen it, and leapt the hero salmon leap up again, and struck off the woman's head. She was Eshin, the mother of the last 3 warriors that had fallen by him. And this was in order to destroy him that she came to meet him. After that the host returned with Scash to her own land, and the hostages were given to her by Elfie, and Cuchulainn stayed there a day of his recovery. At last, when the full lore of solidarity arts with Scash had been mastered by Cuchulainn, there was the apple feat, and the thunder feat, and the blade feat, and the serpine feat, and the spear feat, and the rope feat, and the body feat, and the cat's feat, the salmon feat, the chariot's feat, and throw of staff, the whirl of brave chariots, the gaudburga, bag spear, the wheel feat, the breath feat, the hero's whoop, the blow, the counter blow, running up a lance, the right body on its own point, the Scash chariot, and the heroes twisting round the spear points. Then came to him a message to return to his own land. He took his leave. Then Scash told him what would befall him in the future, and sang him in a seer's large shining kettle, and spoke these words. Welcome, O victorious, warlike Cuchulainn, at the raid of the cattle of Berg, thou wilt be a chariot chief. Great peril awaits thee alone against a vast herd. Hi, thank you. The warriors of Chulainn, thou wilt shatter them. Thy name shall reach the men of Scotland. 30 years, I reckon, the strength of thy valor, further than this I do not aid. Then Cuchulainn went on board his ship and set out for Erin. These were the voyagers on his ship: Lug and Luthen, the 2 sons of Loch, Urfried Ferlin, Fioned and Dust, son of Sterb. They came to the house of Ruin, king of the Isles, on Simonius night. Colmar the victorious and Logo the triumphant were there before him, levying tribute, for at the time a tribute was paid to the Ulster from the Isles and the foreigners, the Western Isles. Then Cuchulainn heard sounds of wailing before him in the stronghold of the king. "What is that lamentation?" asked Cuchulainn. "It is because Dalrigr, daughter of Ror, has given as a tribute to the Fomorians," said they. "Where is the maiden?" he said. They answered, "She is on the shore below." Cuchulainn went down to the strand and drew near to the maiden. "Whence do the men come from?" "From that distinct land yonder, remanded there awaiting them, and he killed the 3 Fomorians in single combat. The last man wounded him in the wrist, and the maiden gave him a strip of her garment to bind round the wound. Then he departed without making himself known to her. The maiden came to the stronghold and told her father the whole story, and afterwards came Chulainn to the stronghold. Like every other guest, Connor and Longo bade him welcome, and there were many in the stronghold who boasted having slain the Fomorians. But the maiden believed them not. Then the king had a bath prepared, and afterwards each one was brought to her separately. Chulainn came like the rest of
Motion
them,
detected at the lookout in your back car.
and the maiden recognized him. "I will give the maiden to thee," said Raoul, "and I myself will pay her wedding dowry." "Not so," said Chulainn, "but if it pleases her, let her follow me this year day to Erin. This day in a year to Erin. She will find me." Then Chulainn came to Mecca and relayed his adventures. And when he had cast his fatigue upon him, he set out to seek Emer at the Rathfogr. For the whole year he remained near it, but could not approach her for the number of his watch. At the end of the year he came and said to his charioteer, "It is today, Ologborg, that we have our tryst with the daughter of Ruand. But we know not the exact place, for we were not wise. Let us go to the coast." When they came to the shore of Loch Corran, strange for Loch, they beheld 2 birds on the sea. Chulainn put a stone in a sling and aimed at the birds. The man ran up after he had hit one of the birds. When they came to him, lo, they saw 2 women, the most beautiful in the world. They were Devagirl, the daughter of Roland, and her handmaiden. "Evil is the deed that thou hast done, O Chulainn," she said. "It was to meet thee we came, and now thou hast hurt us." Chulainn sucked the stone out of her, with its clot of blood round it. "I cannot wed thee now," said Chulainn, "for I have drunk thy blood, but I will give thee to my companion here, Logra of the Red Stripes." And so it was done. Then Chulainn desired to go to Rathfogr, and that day the Scourge Terrace was prepared for him. It was called the Scourge Terrace, or Carpalsadr, on account of the iron scratch that stood out from it, or perhaps because it was first invented by the Syrians. When he arrived at Rathfogr, he jumped the hero salmon leap across the 3 ramparts, so that he was on the ground of the stronghold, and he dealt 3 blows in the lists, so that 8 men fell from each blow, and 1 escaped in each group of the 9, namely Sigur, Ubr, and Cat, 3 brothers of Emer. Forgr made the leap on to the rampart and Rath without fleeing from Chulainn, and then he fell lifeless. Then Chulainn carried off Emer and her foster sister with their 2 weights of gold and silver, leaping back again across the 3rd rampart, and so went forth. From every direction cries were raised around them. Skirrimena rushed against him. Chulainn killed her at the fjord, hence called the fjord of Skersmin. Thus escaped Golbera, and there Chulainn killed 100 of them. "Great is the deed, Gold." "And thou hast done," said Emer, "to have killed 100 men, armed, able-bodied men. Goldach, Ford of Deeds, shall be the name forever," said Chulainn. He reached Crufut, Blood Turf, which was then to be called Reben, Whitefield. He dealt a great angry blows on the hosts in this place, so that the screams of blood broke over on every side. "By thy work the hill covered with a blood-stained tariff today, O Chulainn," cried the maiden. "Hence it is called Crofut, Turf of Blood." The pursuers overtook them at Ath Nymphra on the Boyne. Emer left the chariot, and Chulainn pursued them along the banks and clods flying from the hoofs of the horses across the fjord northward. Then he turned and pursued them northward, so that the clods fell over the fjord southward from the hoofs of the horses. Hence it's called the Ford of the Two Clods, from the flying of the sods hither and there. Now each of the fords formed Ath, Scanmin, at Obra, to the Broing and Brug. Chulainn killed 100, and so he fulfilled all the deeds he had vowed to the maiden. And he came safely out of all of it and reached Aramecca towards the fall of night. Emer was brought into the house of Redbrach to Columcille and to the men of Ulster, and they bade her welcome. Chulainn then took himself his wife, and hence forward they were not separated until they died. Dun dun